Armageddon then. During the Battle of Armageddon, we're hearing of the armies of the world being mobilized by Satan, and they go up on the four corners of the earth to attack the saints, which is the Christian church, and the false prophet and Gog, which is, I believe, the place where communism came from, Gog and Magog. They attack the church. It's communistic socialism and a false prophet. They go to war against the Christian church. Now, some people have tried to understand the New Jerusalem coming down from God out of heaven as against the Jews. Now, this is a very foolish understanding to believe that the New Jerusalem is the the Jewish people. The New Jerusalem is always been the Christian church from the time of Jesus. Now, the thing is, the New Jerusalem is what Jesus has established on the earth as his kingdom, and also from heaven the New Jerusalem descends from God out of heaven. This war which attacks the saints, the Christian saints, it's not an attack against the Jewish people, it's an attack on the Christian church. Now, the reason why I say this is because when we look at the scriptures, it teaches very clearly that there is to be a war. The way of the kings of the east being prepared. Now, the Chinese Communistic Party is at war against the Christian faith at this particular moment in time, because I've been informed that they are trying to bulldoze people's farms, their houses, and in the place of the farms and the houses, millions of people have been forced into these high-rise buildings and with modern conveniences. Now, the way to trade is to buy and sell, and to have like chickens, and to have your little few lambs and your sheep and all those different things, and you can trade with vegetables and you can survive in your poverty, but you can survive and you can enjoy your life and your community around you. Now, the problem is that they've taken them and put them into these modern flats, and they said, have a picture of the your person in charge, okay, the Communistic Party chief, Xi or whoever it is, and have this in your house in a prime place, and they force them then onto benefits, and they then start to say, who is providing for you? And they start to say the Communistic Party puts the new coat on the man. But they've forgotten that it's God who puts the new man in the coat. Now, what they've done is they've taken away the independence of many of the Christians and forced them into a situation where they're in these buildings. This is the case. That what are they trying to say now? Is they're saying, if you want to have the benefits, to pay for the rent and the heat and the light, and to have food, you need to do what, this is what they said in the times of the Christians in the early church. You need to sacrifice, if you like, to the pagan gods. You need to curse Christ. You need, they put 3 ways of finding out who the Christians were, and they were able to isolate them and then to have them thrown to the lions, okay, to have them killed by animals, to have them killed in the arena. And the Christians were found out through tests given to them. This is the case now when you look at what's happening with this way of the kings of the east being prepared. And it says that the river Euphrates would dry up. And I'm trying to work out what that was saying. So it says in the earlier chapter that the peoples of the earth are represented as water, and as languages and tongues and peoples. Therefore, the river Euphrates drying up, it seems to show to me that the peoples of the earth start to dry up, so that the way of the kings of the east being prepared. Now, the Chinese communists attacked the practice of Christian faith and said you were only allowed one child. Now they've changed their policy because millions and 20, 30 million, 40 million men without wives couldn't get wives, and they started to buy up brides at a great cost to the Chinese communists and the Chinese government. They've had to buy up wives from India and other places. So they've been bringing them in from different places at the cost of 10,000. And the Chinese communists are saying, well, this is costing too much. We need to have more than one child. We need to have at least 2 children. So this is what's happening. They're experiments which are anti-Christian. They've been attacking the Christian faith. They've been forcing women to go into hospitals, and they've been murdering their babies. And this is the thing. Over the years, these abominations have taken place. So what I'm saying is, the way of the kings of the east being prepared, chapter 17 of Revelation, okay? And therefore the attack coming against the Christians, and it talks about the waters drying up, which I think is saying that the peoples of the earth are drying up. And for many years this has been happening all over the world. If we remember, Gog attacks the 4 corners of the earth, and the whole world has been following these communistic ideals and communistic party ways. Now, this is the thing, the way of the kings of the east being prepared, and the source of the river Euphrates, is from the land of the Garden of Eden, from the mountains of Ararat. Now, when the ark landed on the mountains of Ararat, it landed right where the Garden of Eden was. And that's where the world started, from the source of the Garden of Eden. Now, the source of the Garden of Eden is in the mountains of Ararat. If you trace the river Euphrates and the Tigris, there's 4 different rivers, and they all came from the mountains of Ararat. And if you look at it to this day, there's a city where the Garden of Eden used to be. Even the entrance to the gardens there, you can see it all. Even the red mountain, the red hills, I mean, that's what Adam means, red. He was made from the red clay there, the red soil. You can see it in the cliffs around it, but it's just a city there now. So you can look at it through documentaries. You can see it on the internet. Now, the thing is, what I'm trying to say is that the source of the river Euphrates was the peoples of the earth being dried up. This could be a meaning to it. And already we're seeing possibilities of these injections could have side effects, they're saying. They have had a series of experiments in the past, and they found that when the mice were injected with some of the components or the parts of the injections, they stopped them having fertility. Now, there is, of course, the whole world has chosen to go down a different path where the Bible says God blessed them, said be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. They have changed this, and they have gone into other things. Anyway, 1 Chronicles chapter 5, I wanted to show you this verse, and I think it's verse 21 starts with. And it says that verse 23, I should say. And they dwelt in the steads until the captivity. Now, what that's saying is that there was a lot of war. And it says, because the war was of God. Now, God, the Bible says, God makes wars to cease in all the earth. And it says that he snappeth the bow, you know, he burns the chariot in the fire, breaketh the spear asunder. God makes wars to cease in all the earth. But the Bible talks about in the book of Revelation that one of the horses, it says, was to take peace from the earth. And this war of Armageddon is a war against God. Now, it says Satan, the devil, okay, or the dragon, gave power and authority, great authority, to the beast. And if you ask me, okay, although it's God who sets up kings, and it's God who puts kings down, God who sets up authorities, sometimes the devil also gives power and a seat, it says, a seat and great authority. Sometimes the devil gives power and authority and a seat. And God, in his permissive will, allows this to happen, and even the saints get killed, even the Christians. Now, this war of Armageddon, now, this war here was of God. It says in 1 Chronicles chapter 5. There were thousands went out to this battle, and of course the tribe of the Israelites who called on God were saved, and they got to inherit the land, and they destroyed the idols and they followed after God. But then we read in a little bit later on how the same tribes which drove out the pagans and called on God, their descendants, their children, decided that they would rebel against God and embraced the idols of the people. Now, those same idols, they made sacrifices to them, and they killed their own children, it says. We read about how they did that in Ezekiel. They burned them in the fire, and it says the firstborn of the children, and it talks about the parents, how they did this wicked thing. It says in Isaiah as well that these things weren't done in a corner. They were clearly seen. It says here in verse 26 of chapter 5, 1 Chronicles, and the God of Israel stirred up the spirit of Pul, king of Assyria, and the spirit of Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, and they carried them away, even the Reubenites and the Gadites and such like. So God stirred up the king of Assyria. So the destruction which came on Israel, this is 100 and something years before the destruction of Judah, of course. God stirred it up, so that the God stirred up the spirit of opposition against Israel, because they'd rejected God and worshipped and served idols. And God says in Ezekiel that they have forgotten me. You don't hear much anymore about God, do we? We don't hear much in the news or anything about God. God seems to be forgotten. And the war of Armageddon is raging right now, I believe. And it talks about judgments are going to fall on the earth, because the Bible says that it'd be like pangs of woman, the pangs of a woman. So they gradually get closer and closer together. So as we come to near the end of the world and the signs of the end of the world, and I take a day for a year to understand the book of Revelation. So 1,260 days, 1,260 years for me, when the prophets are in dead on the streets in Jerusalem. See, that's the two prophets. That means that either the Old and New Testament or the Law and the Prophets as representing that they were dead in the Latin language from 325, I take it, to the establishment of the Reformation. That's how I understand it anyway. So the first resurrection would be understood as being the Reformation. Anyway, that's where I'm going to leave it there for now. So just to say that we're at the end of the world time, and we need to be watching for the signs. Jesus said, the sea and the waves will roar after the Jews repossessed Jerusalem in Luke 2:25, and we're seeing all these things. So yeah, Jesus said that those who truly repent of their sins and truly believe on him will have everlasting paradise to look forward to. And this is what we need to be looking for, is paradise to come in the next life. And I don't see it as 1,000 years on earth. I see it as Jesus not going to come back, I don't believe, and drive around in cars. He's not going to be established on the earth, and then at the end of the 1,000 years the devil somehow is let loose. Now I see this as a 1,000 years where the church has got the power to preach the gospel right to the end of the world, around the whole earth, and that somebody from every tribe, tongue and people and nation is going to be saved. And this is what I believe, and that the 1,000-year reign is this power to preach the gospel, which has happened. The Bible has been established for over 500 years now. We've been in the English language, in the German language, all the languages around the earth. The Bible's been preached, and that's what happens. The war of Armageddon, it's attack on the Christian saints when they tried to stop these powers, as we are seeing now. Laws being made, fines being made, churches being closed, and Jesus comes back, I believe. Why would God allow the earth to carry on anyway if the church isn't going to be effectively preaching and practicing the Christian faith? He's not going to let the world carry on. Jesus said when he comes back, Son of Man comes back to the earth, will he find faith on the earth? It's already looking really bad. Anyway, we'll leave it at that for now.